out in Seattle, you'll find Michael and I at the top of that list because we just do a ton of zero down product with them for that exact same reason. We wanted to help people who didn't necessarily have the means to get into houses. Moving through this, some of the things you might ask yourself in regards to buying a house, budgeting, of course, is really, really important. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to clients who don't take into account the tax benefits of buying. So they'll be like, yeah, you know, like $2,000 a month is all I can afford for rent or for a house. And then once we get through the process, we'll talk about different ways as to maybe what $2,000 of rent looks like in the form of a mortgage. So that's definitely something that we go through that whole process and kind of an overall mortgage analysis. Tracking your past expenses, reviewing your credit card debt, creating a budget, including regular savings, planning for future expenses, things like that we'll go through. And like I said, kind of when I started, for those of you that kind of showed up after the fact, this is just simply kind of a format to try to stimulate questions so that when we kind of get to the Q&A, you guys can be like, oh yeah, he was talking about this or he was talking about that, in addition to any questions you might have. So, so basically one of the things that we talked about in the beginning, I run hot anyways, and that's why I dress like this. And if I was in jeans, it'd be twice as bad. All right. So one of the things that we talked what?
We're gonna let you continue talking. I'm not that mean.
But in addition to during our kind of our mortgage analysis, one of the things that we talked about is how much you can afford. It's a big question. People want to know. It's like their first question: how much can I afford? What are my payments going to be? And can I actually do this? So you'll see there's a few different questions that you guys can start thinking about, different things that we can kind of go over. Of course, tips of getting started. Double checking your credit report, that's great. At the same time, when I get people that contact me and they want to either hold off from one way or the another, whether it's, oh, I want to pay this debt off, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I always tell people, don't do anything. The first thing you should do is meet with a mortgage guy and just sit down and tell them, because there might be things. I've had people wanted to pay off a car. Oh, I want to get my car down because I want to qualify for more. Don't do that. Sit down with somebody because there may be a better way to utilize those funds. And those are just different things. So the idea is to just kind of suspend judgment when you're getting this process and get with somebody and kind of go through everything before you start sitting at home and doing everything yourself. Let's see, obviously getting pre-approved, hired a real estate agent, blah, 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 and all that stuff. So down payment assistance is one of the things that we do a lot of, and we do the comparisons between, is it better to go zero down? Is it better to do 3% down, 3.5% down, conventional versus FHA? Kind of taking all of your situation and breaking it down into, you know, what's actually going to work the best for you. Because everybody will bring up examples like, oh, well, you know, the person in the cubicle next to me at work or family member told me this. And matter of fact, I just had one of my assistants called me and said that she talked to one of our clients who said she talked to her brother, or he talked to his brother, who's a financial planner, and was giving him some advice, although the advice that he was giving him didn't apply to him at all because of his credit scores and the type of program that he had to get approved for. So those are the different things that you really got to look for when you kind of getting qualified for working with somebody. So there's some loan comparison information here as well, different things to kind of look at. Of course, we can run some numbers too as to what you qualify for. Let's see, down payments comparison as well, another thing to look at. Home buying process kind of starts out with, you know, getting pre-approved, shopping for a home, staying pre-approved, and of course, getting under contract. Pre-approval, what to look for there, debt to income ratio, down payment, credit history, assets, employment history, financial history. Those are the main things that a bank is going to look at when you guys are going through that process as far as getting pre-approved. And that's all stuff that we can talk about as well. Getting pre-approved, some of the documentation that you'll need, what would be applicable if you're a veteran, things like that. Let's see. Yeah, additional information. Of course, part of the mortgage analysis is going through and really looking at a loan product that actually fits your lifestyle, fits what you're looking for. One of the things I heard years ago when we went through 2008 kind of mortgage meltdown, there was some loan product out there that everybody kind of gave everybody a bad rap. Adjustable rate mortgages, I'm sure you guys have heard that. And even though one of the things, there's a loan product for everybody. What happened is a lot of people would get pushed into a loan product that didn't fit them. But there's not a bad loan product out there. Everything has a purpose, everything has a need. It's just making sure that you get set up with the right loan product. Home loan process, there's some things there that we can go through. And if we were doing kind of like a actual going through the financing aspect of it, I'd be going through this in more detail. But I know one of the things that we want to be getting to is what's going on in this market, because I could sit here and talk all day on this pamphlet. And so that's why I'm kind of blowing through it. Mortgage insurance, you guys have always heard mortgage insurance, why you could basically be paying mortgage insurance, what it is. Mortgage insurance information on getting pre-approved, staying pre-approved. Then here, basically why guild, and some different things that we can talk about there. And that's stuff. So I just wanted to fly through this and give you guys kind of some talking points and stuff to kind of think about. And then when we get into Q&A, I can kind of go into more about why this is actually a good market to buy. So.
And that's what the agents are going to tell you about,
Yeah.
real life experiences. So bring them in, you're up, sir.
All right. Hello, I'm Ricky. I have been with Anton's team for quite a few years now. Known him for about 9 years or so. Prior military, I was in the Navy. I worked here on the Everett base. I've been in Bremerton, Seattle. Pretty much spent all my time here in this area in the military. So a couple of things that Jason was talking about with your numbers and your interest rates and find out the different programs. A lot of people get numbers stuck in their head. Just like myself, just like any of us, we get a number in our head. We find out, okay, well, I can afford this much a month. I can afford this much, or I won't only want to pay this amount for a house. The numbers are really not so much important as finding the right loan program to use, and then finding the right agent to help you identify how to maximize the asking price and your options in your loan program, right? So just for the numbers' sake, I'm going to use a couple of numbers. We're going to go with the $500,000 house. There's still a few of those out there. Well, I get it, there's not a lot. I'm just using this number for the sake of the numbers, right?
Do you want me to get the right one?
I do.
Here.
So $500,000 house with, let's just say an average, a good qualified buyer right now could be looking at about a 5.75% interest rate. With a 20% down payment, I get it, some of you may not have a 20% down, but there's programs out there to account for that. But so for a $500,000 house with 20% down, we're going to finance about $400,000, and we're going to be looking at a payment of about $28.13 a month with your principal, interest, tax, and insurance included in that, right? So I'm giving you the numbers. A lot of times you just get the numbers that are prior to your PITI, but I'm giving you that included. Okay, so this is a number that we like to get focused on, right? We see a house that's marketed on this, and then we think, okay, well, the market is depreciating. So I don't want to pay $500,000 for this house because I know it's already overpriced. And you're probably right in the fact that it's overpriced. So what happens is we get this number in our head and we're like, well, I don't want to pay that. How about we ask them to go into less, right? So this is where having a really good agent comes into play in determining what's the best way to get that same amount of money that you want to decrease that price in and apply it to the best place in your loan, right? So what we have a lot of times, and I'm just going to go with 15,000 because this is kind of math that I worked out to make it easy for me. If we take this and we just want to ask, hey, you know what, can you take $15,000 off your price? Most likely in this market right now, they're going to say yes to that without question, right? So any agent can tell you, hey, go in here, ask them, we're going to send them an offer of $485, and they're going to say yes, and everything's going to be great, right? So if you offer that $485 and you keep that 5.75% interest rate, you're going to bring your payment down to $27.29 a month, right? That's only an $84 and some change savings, okay? So this right here isn't really enough to help you go, okay, well, there goes my dream house. I still can't afford that, right? Because this is still a pretty high mortgage right here. But we can take that same $15,000 that we're asking them to come down, and instead we're going to make the offer of $500,000, which is what they're asking for. But we're going to ask for $15,000 in closing costs instead. So we're still taking that $15,000. They're still only netting $485 on their house, but because you turned your head away from this number and were able to stick with this, you're going to ask for $15,000 in closing costs. Use that $15,000 closing cost to buy this interest rate of 5.75 down to 4.25. Does that sound like a reasonable number? 15 grand for a point and a half? It's pretty close, I think.
Use that right now.
Okay, so by this rate, this $500,000 down, still with your 200 or with your 20% down, this 4.25% interest rate is going to bring your payment all the way down to $2,466 a month. Putting that below the $2,500, that's a whole $347 a month in difference. Just for the exact same $15,000 used in the right place is going to help you get a lower payment, which this number now seems a lot more affordable than this number right here, right? So, and then the same applies to, you know, we can ask for $50,000 less. We can buy down, you know, depending on how you're working with the bank, maybe we can buy you down 2%. Maybe we only need to buy down 1% to get your payment in the right thing, in the right bracket to get your offer accepted, right? So we don't always just have to subtract from the overall asking price, because their agent, the listing agent, is going to be talking to them in the back anyways and already telling them, hey, we need to consider a price reduction. We need to consider a price reduction. So then you can come around by that and say, no, don't reduce your price, just pay our closing costs. We'll pay you what you're asking for, and then we're going to get the better rate for us. It's going to work out better in your case. Okay. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to ask me. We'll do some site talk after the fact, and you guys can ask me questions afterwards, and we can try to figure out the numbers. We can sit down with you individually and see how that works out for you. And I can run numbers based off of the numbers that you think that you want to buy or that you think that you can afford. So then another thing is renting, right? One thing that we hear a lot is because the market is so high, the market is just kind of, it went through the roof. Well, it's declining a lot, but we still have people that they think that it's going to go down a lot more. So I'm going to wait, right? I'm not going to buy right now. I'm going to wait. Okay, I can't afford to buy right now, so I'm going to wait. Right now, I'll tell you, that's not really getting the most bang for your buck, right? If you're paying around $2,500 a month in rent right now, you could be paying $2,500 a month for your own mortgage just by sitting down with a lender and talking to a lender, and then sitting down with an agent and actually go through the process of looking at the houses that are out there. Because a lot of the houses, if you're already paying $2,500, $2,700, $2,900 a month for rent, you probably can afford a mortgage. You just don't know that there's a loan program out there for you, right? And then a couple other numbers that I'm going to show you. So if you're paying $2,500 a month in rent, that's $30,000 a year that you're never going to see again. $30,000 a year is just gone. Okay. When you put that $30,000 into your mortgage, and you can get a payment around that $2,500 range, you're going to see the decrease in your principal payment of your mortgage. You're going to realize tax benefits. You're going to realize other benefits to being a homeowner, and you will realize that annual appreciation. Now, this past year we just went through, we're seeing record appreciation of houses, right? Well, we're looking at getting back to normal, which Ashton will talk about that a little later. But you'll start seeing that 2 to 5% a year of realistic appreciation in your house. And by waiting 1 year, you're adding another $30,000 of money that you're never going to see, rather than adding $30,000 at 5% of increase. So that same $500,000 house that we talked to a year, that 5% of annual increase makes that house value at $525,000, and over 2 years, $551,000. Right. So 2 years of waiting in a rental can end up costing you $60,000, or it can make you $50,000 minus the principal that you pay down on your current mortgage, and still have your payment around this 2,500 budget area, wherever you're at. Again, the budget's going to be different than that. These numbers just for the sake of numbers, that just to kind of show you why it's important to sit down with an agent and sit down with a member at the same time.
Welcome to Marysville. We haven't been here before. Welcome to Marysville.
I think that's my cue. I know I talk really fast. I'll keep that up. So I'm going to turn it over to Elias here to talk to you guys.
Awesome. All right. So, how's it going, guys? Elias. Yes, what I want to talk about was the negotiation aspect. So, back a few months, we got the house. We could negotiate with that. We have to give everything. Like there are stories about how we had to test it, right? Or like $100,000, $200,000 grants. The good thing is that now you can actually negotiate. You can actually ask, for example, inspections, right? For example, say buying a car, right? When you try to buy before you buy it, with the inspection, you have the opportunity, right? You can actually go out and do property inspection. And so my thing is I'm going to talk about some examples. So for example, we've been having some deals where we can ask for everything, right? We can ask for $50,000. It's for you want to pay $10,000 or $50,000 over 50%, 25% down. You have to pay down another $10,000, right? Because you have to pay the whole cost, right? Well, now you can ask the seller for back then. One good example is that so inspection is it's like we need that we need to use something dollars. And we ask the seller on top of the $6,000 figures, that would be my turn. So during that time we asked for $50,000 help for some products. And so on top of that, we asked for another $10,000 to help fix the roof. So that was $45,000 that we got from the seller that we would have never got back. So just to acknowledge the respect that this is a great opportunity for especially for first-time home buyers that you could never got back. Right?
So the $15,000 in closing costs, that's more closing costs.
Yes.
So that would have been used to pay down the interest rate for that buyer to make more money.
Exactly.
And then during the inspection period, before that comes back, they got $10,000 worth of
It was thrown the offer away, right? And that's something that right now we have an opportunity. So that was now it's action.
Hello, I'm Ashton with the RESG team. I just wanted to talk about like what statistics show are going on in the market right now. There was a flyer left on the table for you guys with our contact information, and under that is the note page, and then there's some sheets with statistics graphs that will like this. So the first one should say average shows to funding. This is how many times the property was showed to a prospective buyer before the seller received an offer. Accepted an offer. Didn't accept it. Okay. So in 2021, we saw the biggest spike in bidding wars, the most buyers through each house. In the beginning of 2021, we had 35 buyers competing over each listing on average. Then we had buyer fatigue. All the buyers were like, this is insanity. I'm not dealing with this BS. No. So we saw a slump in the amount of buyers that were doing anything in the middle of 2021. Then in 2022, beginning of 2022, we saw a spike. Buyers were just like, okay, this is a new normal. We just accept it. Fine, whatever. We'll do the bidding wars again. So we saw that come up. Now we're back down to a record low, if you guys can see that. We're down to 11 buyers competing over every listing. So instead of competing with 35 buyers and having to get that $200,000 over list, and being like, sure, I'll take it as it is. I know it needs a new roof, but it's fine. I'm just doing it. Now we can negotiate because we're not having to compete with any other buyers. Does that make sense? We're also seeing it, same thing on the next graph here. This goes back to 2019. We see the normal appreciation rate through 2019 and 2020. I mean, it was higher than normal, but it wasn't extreme. And then 2021, we saw that record bidding wars and it just spikes right up. Because of the bidding wars, we had an increase in the percentage of list price. So people were paying well over the price that it was listed. And then the buyer fatigue came back down, and then it just gets up to it. And it went back up. Now we're down below 100% of list price. Today, houses are selling for around 98% of the list price. So we're not even getting a list price nowadays. It's a lot of room for negotiation. Last one, we're seeing, again, normal appreciation. This is the average sales price in Snohomish County. All of these stats are Snohomish County only. We're seeing typical appreciation, 2021, we saw prices spike, then they plateaued as buyers got fatigued. And then we saw the prices spike again at the beginning of 2022. Now they've come back down because we're not having those bidding wars anymore. We're not having that insanity. There's room for negotiation, there's room to breathe. Okay, so we're seeing prices come back down. Yes. We're seeing before, during the bidding wars, we saw a lot of homes setting review dates because for a minute there, houses were selling in hours, right? But then we saw the rise of review dates. That way buyers had plenty of time to come in and write an offer. Now we're not seeing review dates anymore. Homes are selling in about a week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on the city, depending on the area, depending on the price point. There's a lot of dependings on that.
And depending on the motivation too, some sellers are even asking or saying that they're going to be able to pay some closing costs for buyers, which is really, really cool. That's something that we've never done either, right?
So the biggest thing here that I want to make sure that I hit on for Ricky is don't get tapped onto this price. $500,000, that's my list price. Like, or that's the price I can afford. You could probably wiggle around that price because we're seeing 98% of list price on the average home sale, right? So you could negotiate that down. We could be looking at 525, right? Or we could have some room to wiggle and negotiate on the closing costs in order to buy down the interest rates to make it more affordable. So don't get too stuck on this price when we're shopping on money or whatever. And then for OS, there's lots of room for negotiation. Which brings us to our last flyer that I gave you guys. Just want to touch on it real quick. It is steps to home ownership. Pre-approval, first step is always to talk to a lender, figure out what our budget is. Because I really hate it when my buyers think that they're going to be able to shop for a $700,000 home. And then we find the dream home, they're so excited. And then we go to get our pre-approval letter and we're only pre-approved for $550. That's a huge distance. And that means we're shopping in an entirely different bracket. And if their house, or their heart is set on that $700,000 house, it's going to be broken off for every house that fits their budget.
I like when you say it's like shopping without your wallet.
It's so shopping. And, you know, in today's market, it's like shopping without your wallet during Black Friday sale.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's how it was at least. It's not so bad.
it's gone now. Then we find a house, we make an offer. Contingency period is that inspection period. We can renegotiate terms. Once we find out new information, then we get an appraisal, underwriting. That's all part of the lender side of it. And then our closing, that's when we get the keys, hand over the money and all of that. From the time that we make our offer and get an offer accepted to the time that we close, it's generally about 30 to 45 days. So if this is something where you guys want to be moved in, a month, 2 months, 3 months, this is something that you really need to talk to a lender now, because it does take time for all of this to happen. It takes a month to 2 months for all of this to happen. Does that make sense?
And talking to a lender is really, I think, where you get to have an idea of like what Jason's gonna say, don't do anything until you do or no, because when I bought a house with Michael, they do a credit scenario, and I took my husband off for one of my, literally was just a signer, and he said to take him off, and it bumped my husband's credit score almost 100 points. So there's just weird things that you don't know, and you think you're like, oh, I have to buy that, I have to pay off my credit cards, I have to do this, I have to do that. That's not necessarily true. Everybody's case is very individual. So talking to them and figuring out what your specific situation is always the best move. Always. Okay.
We can open it to Q&A now.
Okay. Who's got questions?
One thing that I'll throw out there as far as comparing the last 2 years, the market was insane. Right now, you may have seen stuff on social media regarding marrying the house, date the rate. You can always renegotiate the interest rate. Right now, interest rate is scaring everybody. At the same time, people actually can get into houses now. You get a better price, you get better terms, you get closing costs covered. And then 12 months, 18 months down the road, the likelihood is there'll be an opportunity. I've been doing this for 30 years, and the interest rates go up and they go down. And very rarely do they ever, I mean, maybe at the most, I think back in 94, interest rates were got to like 7%, 8%. And they stayed there for a couple of years. Other than that, we've seen 4 or 5% interest rates. So they're going to come back down. And then at that particular time, all of the negotiating that you got done in the last 12 to, say now to 12 months from now, getting a better price on the house is all going to make a lot more sense. So that you could refinance, take your 5% rate, you get to drop it down to 4%. I don't have a crystal ball, but I've been doing this a long time, and that's what happens. So there's a high likelihood that will happen. So.
Refinance is always a good option. I refined and I had to pay $1. Worked out great.
As far as qualifying in general, a lot of people don't really know like what we look at as a lender. Like employment, you have to have 2 years of something, like on the books employment. 2 years is important. Credit scores, we have to have a credit score most of the time. There are loan programs where we don't need a score, but you should have a credit score. It makes the process a lot easier. But we can go as low as 540. It does become a lot more challenging with 540. I always tell clients, if you're at 620, I can work with you. It's a lot easier. It opens up a lot of doors at 620. The 0 down loans we offer, they have a 620 minimum credit score. So the 2 years of employment, 620 credit score. And as we were mentioning, this market's changed. There are closing costs for sellers when they sell a house. They have to pay fees, just like buyers have to pay fees to buy a house. But in the market we're in right now, if you're a first-time home buyer and want to use a 0 down payment loan, there are still closing costs. So if you ask the seller to cover those closing costs, you can in fact buy a house with 0 money to closing, like not even $1. You can buy a house, get your keys, and you didn't put $1 down. It's really, really cool. But again, 2 years employment, 620 credit score, those are the big factors on that. And we really determine, my first question I ask clients is like, what do you want your payment to be? So if you say, hey, I want my max payment to be per month $2,000, that helps me a lot. So that I can determine like what price range you should be looking at up front. You might think an $800,000 house looks fantastic, but maybe it's 400. If you want 2,000, maybe it's 400,000. And like as we were mentioning, we'd rather cross that bridge in advance and be looking at homes and getting your heart set on, a $700,000 house would be the issue forward.
Well, and you guys will also run into scenarios too. If we can get the seller to buy down your rate, what price point you could be looking at versus if we're at, the base 5 and a quarter or whatever it is. So they'll run scenarios for us, and so we can look at what range we can shop depending on what the seller will be able to do for us. But it gives us options for sure.
It will always, when somebody applies, basically the main things we need are like W-2s, pay stubs, maybe tax returns. It's not a lot of stuff to figure out what your income is that we can use, which will help us determine what your max payment can even be. But knowing that payments, it goes a long ways in determining your max payment result. So,
It's been a while, but before the 2021 crazy bidding wars. But I did help a first-time home buyer purchase a home with 0 down. And the only payments that they made was the inspection, which was $450. And then they had to bring about $1,000 to the closing table. So for under $1,500, they purchased a home. And I was in shock. It was the first time I'd ever helped a 0 down buyer, but so little money on the table. And I was like, this is a nice house. And I don't even know that you could get a deposit on a rental at that cheap.
Yeah.
And you just bought a house for that. It's crazy. And your first mortgage payment doesn't come for 30+ days after you close, typically.
yeah, on-time payments are due the 1st or the 15th. So if you were to close in anytime in August, your first payment's not until October. So it's 1st to the 15th. So you have a little bit of time between renting and, if you're renting now and your first payment.
So it's not like you have to come up with all of this money for closing costs and then turn around and 2 weeks later, you have to make the first mortgage payment. It's not that.
One of the biggest things I can tell you as an agent is you really have to be in the game to play, right? Because once you have that offer on paper, the terms can or the conditions can change for you a lot, right? We can talk verbally about, okay, well, will you take this much off your price? No, I'm not going to do that. But if I give you a piece of paper that says, here's what we're going to offer, and they don't have another piece of paper like that in their hand, then they're likely to want to talk to us. In the height, when before the market started going down, I had 2 VA buyers. They were, I think one was in December and one was in January that I worked on with Michael. Both of them were 0 down VA loans, and I was able to get both of them into a house with 0 down, and we got the buyers to pay all of their closing costs, or the sellers to pay their closing costs. And these were 2 shipmates that worked for me when I was in that they bought a house in the Bremerton area, and we were still seeing houses go for $50,000 to $75,000 over asking price, and we got these guys in there at asking price, but still got closing costs covered because they got into the game. So the biggest step is put that step forward, get that pre-approval from the lender. Don't wait 4 months with that pre-approval on hand because that might expire or something may change and then it'll be good. And then get with an agent and be actively looking for houses while that's going. And then just be ready to jump on a house that you're like, this is going to work for me, especially if it's your first home, right? Your first home is probably not going to be a last. You're always going to get in there and find stuff that you want to change. And you're going to want to move very shortly. Usually we see people in houses from 5 to 7 years for their first house before they end up moving. So, don't feel like you need everything in your dream house in your first house. The key is getting into a house that you own, that you're not paying someone else's mortgage.
That's all I heard me say this too. Like when I bought my first house years ago, and I remember I looked back at the pictures online with my wife, and I'm like, look at this house. It looked like a haunted house. And I told them it looked like a haunted house. It was so gross, it was so nasty, but we put so much love and time and effort into it. And I was even really nervous about that, buying a house at that time. I thought it was at the peak, and I was really nervous about it, but it was like the best decision we ever had. And we've since sold that house and upgraded, but a house is a house, and it's like it's a lot better than renting for the most part. Unless you're living with family and you're not paying anything. Obviously,
That could be unfun also.
well,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, the home buying is exciting. It's maybe you won't get your dream house from the beginning, but it's a stepping stone to get your next house. And it's like I don't know.
Like Ricky was saying, or Eliza was saying, I don't know which one, somebody said, you're gaining appreciation every year. So that's money that you didn't have before, right? So if all of a sudden 5 to 7 years from now, you gain appreciation every year, $25,000 a year, you're looking at, now I have $100,000 to put down, and that's a different house, right? So
That's what happened in the bidding wars where people were bidding, cash in full for these houses, or being able to pay half the price of the house in a down payment. It's not because they had that saved up in their pocket for a rainy day. It's because they had sold a house that they had owned previously, and they'd taken the equity from the sale of the house, the profits from the sale of the house, to have in cash to buy a new house. And you can't have that kind of big cash unless you have the house to sell first. Like, it's a huge investment to be able to have that nest egg.
Well, and it gets you started, right? And right now, like we've been talking about, the ability to negotiate, get better deals without the bidding war is right now, probably for the next 12 months, maybe less, but it's not going to go on forever because they will move the interest rates back down and then the house prices will go back up. So you've got a pretty small window relatively to kind of make these moves and get things moving for yourself. So I would, if you guys have the opportunity to do it, I would highly advise to do it sooner rather than later.
And if you're nervous about your credit scores, we have credit simulators. So when we check your credit, like she was mentioning, I can go through and it'll pinpoint, hey, like if the buyer does all these things, you might be paying them a credit card $100. It'll tell us what to
It's
do.
so weird. It's the littlest random things happen.
And then they do it, and then I'll work with you to get your score where you need to be. It's a lot of clients just don't have scores that they want. Not everybody has an 800, not everybody has a 700. It's common to have lower 600s and even lower. But if you're a motivated buyer and you want us to help you kind of get your score to where you need to be, then we have programs for that. There's no charge for that. We don't charge any fees. So
You give us a plan and then we work the plan.
Mhm.
It's a lot easier than trying to shoot from the hip without understanding how credit really works. Do I know how credit really works? No. It's somebody told me that that's my score. What am I supposed to do? I'm not sure. They'll tell you. It works great.
listen.
Yes, I do. All right, questions.
I need one question.
How do you pick an agent? Or do you come in here and you guys pick the agent class?
It's a lottery system. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
fortunately you're with this person.
Yeah.
No, honestly, you could interview agents and then figure out somebody that will, is going to work well with your schedule. But that's really them. It's like we're the lending side. So
The real answer, sorry, I didn't cut it off.
this is where they this or
Interview multiple agents,
Okay.
right? Because you're gonna want to get somebody that you feel comfortable with, somebody that you're gonna want to talk to about your finances, somebody that you're gonna want to talk to about your family. Why do you need a 5-bedroom? Can you settle for a 2-bedroom, right? Somebody that you're gonna feel comfortable conversating with, it's not just about buying the house. We need a lot of information, sometimes personal information, to be able to help find you the right house, or find you, so if we can't find you the right house, find you a house that will actually work for you and doesn't, throw you out of the market.
I was gonna say all agents have access to the same homes.
Right.
Like all agents in Western Washington have access to the Northwest MLS. It's where all homes are listed.
I mean, everything's starting on us.
So-
Everybody's an agent now. That's their side gig. And it's like,
They're
yeah.
flying out the window now
oh,
too.
absolutely. Yeah, right.
Everybody has access to the same homes, so don't feel like just because somebody sent you a property, that means that you have to go with that agent, or somebody's at an open house, you have to go with that agent. It's find an agent that you are comfortable with and that communicates with you really well, that you can trust to lead you through this whole process. Because while I gave you like a nice 8 steps, like this is what the process is,
I like your
it's a
spreadsheet.
huge, it's a roller coaster. It's a huge emotional deal to be able to purchase a home. So making sure that you find somebody that you can really trust to carry you on that journey.
Well, and I will say, not all real estate agents are created equally. It's a very low bar to, well, there's a very low bar to enter to be a real estate agent, okay? I'm sorry, it's 90 hours, okay? It's not that much. So if somebody hasn't been, doesn't have a support system, doesn't have a team around them that's really going to be able to facilitate your guys' transactions, because like Ashton said, it is a roller coaster. And like they were telling, there are negotiations. So if you just willy-nilly, I did one transaction ever, how confident are you in that agent that's going to be able to negotiate on your behalf, right? It's a skill set. I do business with people that I know and can trust, and that have been doing it, or with people that have been doing it long enough to to understand how to get deals done, because in the last 2 years, especially as a seller, like, I just do whatever I want. I don't have to do nothing, you know, and the buyers are like, if I don't have $1 million, I can't buy a house. Those days are gone, and so negotiation and skill set and the person that you feel comfortable and trust is very important.
Yeah, like maybe jot down a few things that are important to you about what's important to the lender and, you know, your agent, and just interview people.
Questions?
If you're a buyer, look for someone that specializes in buying. Because, you know, there's a lot of agents out there that only want to do listings, because listings are typically easier. It's once the house goes on the market, you're most likely going to get a sale out of it. If you're a buyer's agent, you might not, right? I might show you 8 houses and you decide, no, never mind, I don't even want to do this anymore, I'm out. And you just spend a lot of time and effort in not dating. So you're going to want someone who knows that going into it and is actually willing to put that time in regardless of what they're doing. We're still going to ask the seller.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
Question. Oh, mine's more, so I'm tribal, so I want to go through the whole tribal. So I don't know if you guys have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, we can sell out there too.
okay.
Yeah.
It's an extra couple of steps, but it's honestly not that different. It's absolutely different. Question in the back.
No, okay, everybody eat something also, and then if you guys want to talk to anybody individually, you have a question that you don't want to have open forum conversation, they're gonna be hanging around to chat.
There's business cards next to the food. Go ahead and take one of our business cards. Reach out to us privately if that's more comfortable for you or in your own time. I know personally, after any of these meetings, I go home. Yeah, I have a question. Go ahead and email or text us off our contact information. That's totally fine.